From Washington, D.C. to the heart of America, welcome to Mark Alford's America. I'm freshman Congressman from Missouri, Mark Alford, and I believe in America, and I believe in you. And most importantly, I believe that our greatest days are still ahead of us. You know, each week we take you behind the scenes to share the stories, the news, the legislation, and to meet the great folks who are helping shape our nation. One of those is Congressman Austin Scott. Congressman Scott is in his 7th term for Georgia's 8th Congressional District. He holds key roles on the committees concerning national security, military readiness, and agriculture. He champions Georgia's agriculture and rural interests, focusing on trade, crop insurance, rural community support. And he's also working to make sure that the U.S. military's capabilities against global threats are all they can be. Congressman Scott is a University of Georgia grad with a background in insurance. He really cares about the prosperity of Georgia and our great nation. He's also a friend. Austin Scott, welcome to 1516 Longworth. Good to have you.
Mark, glad to be here. Appreciate you doing this. Great opportunity for us to talk about what's happening in Washington and, reiterate just how great the country is. And cut the TV off, read the book, and remember.
Yeah. I want to start with something that happened recently.
Yep.
You ran for Speaker of the House.
I did.
Tell us about that journey and that decision.
Yeah, well, I believe in rules. And if you watch what was happening, I don't think the group that took Kevin McCarthy out did the country a favor, certainly didn't do the Republican Party a favor. But then we had an election inside the conference, and Steve Scalise won the votes inside the conference. And some of the people who were supporting Jim Jordan would not give Steve Scalise the votes on the floor of the House of Representatives, which meant that Steve didn't get to go to the floor. And again, the rules are you win in the conference.
Mm-hmm.
You advance, and we are supposed to support the Republican nominee as Republican.
Right. It's a rule we all agreed on.
That's right. And if you don't follow the rules, then you end up with chaos, and chaos is something that works for people who don't want to govern, but it doesn't work for people who do. And I would just suggest to you also that as a religious person, chaos is a tool of the devil. It is not a tool of God, and you can't govern based on chaos. You're not going to do anything good operating under chaos. And so I believe in the rules. And then when Steve wasn't allowed to go to the floor because he couldn't get the votes, we ended up the next day with Jim Jordan. Nobody was running against Jordan. And so at 11:59, I was standing there with my jeans on and a Kuyu shirt, unshaved, and I told Elise to put my name on the list. And
She's our conference chair.
She's our conference chair, and my wife literally found out on the internet, as did my staff, that I was running for Speaker of the House. And I walked back to the office, and everybody's like, "Why didn't you tell me you were running for Speaker of the House?" I'm like, "Well, because it wasn't."
What'd your wife say?
She was proud. She thought it needed to be done. She, like me, did not appreciate what had been done to Kevin, where 8 Republicans sided with all of the Democrats to take the Republican Speaker of the House out. Then she's very close to Scalise as well as I am, and certainly didn't appreciate what had been done to him. And so I walked back in and I didn't have a speech or anything written, Mark. If you're going to be the majority party, you have to act like the majority party. And that's exactly what I said. And that means you have to do the right things the right way. And so we had a discussion for about an hour and a half where we answered questions about how we would go forward. I do think we need to get ourselves out of this current situation that we're in and not have a government shutdown November the 17th, which is right around the corner. I think if we do have a shutdown, that's going to look very bad for Republicans, make us look like we can't govern. And I think it helps the Democrats, and it hurts America, and it also hurts the Republican Party. So we had the discussion about how we would do things. Ultimately, Jim Jordan won that race. We received 81 votes in that and came out and did what we should do when you lose, and that's endorse the other person. And as you know, we had about a week of votes, and Jim did not get 217 votes to become the Speaker, and so we went again. And my wife at this stage was like, "Well, you got 81 votes. You need to try it again." And I'm like, "Baby, I've had a little more time to think about it now. We need to understand what it means for our lives." And she and I had an honest discussion. We ran again. In that election, Tom Emmer won in the conference.
How many were in that next race? There were like 7 or 8.
There were 9.
9, okay. And you were one of those 9.
I was one of the 9. I ended up in the 5th slot. 2 of them, I think, withdrew the morning of the vote. And then it went about like we expected it to. Not like, I'm not going to tell you like I hoped it would, but it went pretty close to how I expected it to. Tom Emmer is the whip, and he won that round. I think Mike Johnson came in second in that round, and then two others were real close, third and fourth. And when they dropped out, then Emmer won. Emmer then did not get to go to the floor because people withheld their votes from him. And then with Mike Johnson, when he got across the finish line, he got unanimous support from the party on the floor. And so now we have Mike Johnson as Speaker of the House. Great guy, great friend of mine. And I left his speech a little early, and I was headed to a meeting with the Ukrainian parliament on national security-related issues, and someone from the press said, well, sir, you're leaving early. Do you resent the fact that you lost? I'm like, actually, I'm going to a meeting with the Ukrainian parliament. I'm going to watch the Georgia Bulldogs play on Saturday, and I'm going deer hunting, and Mike's going to be at work. So no, I don't. I mean, I congratulate him, and I'm glad that we've got a good speaker.
Yeah, and thanks for moving. We still have the CR staring us down, though.
We do. And that's something we need to pass. We do not need to have a shutdown. We're less than 10 days from that. We need some time to get the appropriation measures completed and passed. As you know, Mark, and I hope the public is watching this, there's a very small faction of the party, a very, very small faction of our party that's elected in D.C. that is not yet committed to vote for a continuing resolution. If we don't have a continuing resolution, I believe we'll have a shutdown. I don't see any way to not have a shutdown if you don't get a continuing resolution, because the budget measures are simply not going to be completed by that timeline. And so we need a CR, whether it's stepped or whether it's straight, it is irrelevant to me. What is relevant is that we don't have a shutdown right before Thanksgiving. America deserves better than that. And, I'm going to support Mike in whichever way he decides to go, whether it be stepped or straight on the CR. And then we need to make sure that Senate Republicans don't do what they did to us last December and send over a massive omnibus bill right before the Christmas break that increases spending and does some things that we just don't need Senate Republicans to do that.
One thing that's become very clear, and I think Mike Johnson said this in conference this week, is we've got to change the way we do business.
Absolutely.
I think everyone is hopeful that is going to change, that we're going to get a budget done, that we're going to get these appropriation bills passed during the summer at some point, and we're not going to wait to the last minute to get things done.
Absolutely. We should start the appropriations process as soon as possible. I mean, somewhere in, at least before April, we should be putting appropriation measures on the floor of the House of Representatives, and then we should get them done. Some of them are simple, some of them are hard, but, maybe you do the simple ones first, give more time to do some of the bigger ones in committee, and then before we leave for the August break, we should have the appropriation measures across the floor. That's the way, if I'm not mistaken, it was done when I first got here under Speaker Boehner, and we need to move sooner on these things, and we need to get them across the floor so that they can be conferenced. Because remember now, you've got a Democrat-controlled Senate, a Republican-controlled House. These bills, even if the same party controlled both entities, you would go to what's called a conference committee with Senate language and House language, and then you end up with a hybrid, a blend of the two that ultimately would become the law.
What do you say to some of those in America, some in my district, who say, shut it down, let's shut it down, I'm so sick of these CRs, let's just shut it down and we'll deal with it?
Yeah. No, it's I hear them. I get the same thing in my district. It's frustration that is coming from the American citizens that is well founded in the frustration. But the consequences of a shutdown are much worse than the consequences of giving us some time to negotiate with the Senate. The Democrats control the House. I'm sorry, the Democrats control the Senate. Mm-hmm. The Democrats control the White House. Mm-hmm. We as Republicans in the House, where we have the influence, have got to have some time to give our Speaker an ability to negotiate with the Senate on what we are and what we're not going to fund. And I would remind you, Mark, it's not just about the total dollars that are being spent. It's about what those dollars are being spent on.
Gotcha.
So we've got a good Speaker of the House. We've got the opportunity to do some things and do them the right way. The cuts won't be as big as I think most people that are Republicans would like for them to have. We're very concerned about the deficit, as everybody should be. but we have to make continual progress, and continual progress just by definition requires us in the House to negotiate with the Senate Republicans and the Senate Democrats and the White House and House Democrats to get to a middle of the road solution that keeps our economy moving in the right direction.
Hey, stay with us, folks. You're listening to Mark Alford's America. We'll be back with Congressman Austin Scott from Georgia. In just a little bit, we're going to talk about the grandparents, his grandparents and the role they played in his life and the influence. We're also going to talk about the Farm Bill, a very important measure which also might have some difficulty moving forward. We'll talk about that when we come back. Stay with us. Welcome back, everyone, to Mark Alford's America, where we give you a behind-the-scenes look at Washington, let you meet some of the great folks shaping our nation. Today, we're talking to Congressman Austin Scott of Georgia's 8th Congressional District. Austin, let's talk about the Farm Bill. We're both on the Ag Committee together. You've been through this, putting together the Farm Bill for 2018. It is not an easy lift. For the folks out there who don't know what the Farm Bill entails, kind of give us a little primer on the Farm Bill.
Yeah, so there are a lot of things in it. Obviously, you've got the SNAP aspect of it, which is now almost 80% of total Farm Bill spending.
Used to be called food stamps.
It did, supplemental nutrition, and certainly there are a lot of Americans that, through no fault of their own, need help. And we as a country, we're the richest country in the world. We've got plenty of money to take care of anybody in this country that can't take care of themselves. But no country has enough money to take care of people who choose not to take care of themselves. And so, as you know, we've had this huge debate over work requirements. I personally am in favor of raising the age for able-bodied working-age adults to have to work or to get some type of training so they can go to work to receive SNAP benefits. There's been a lot of opposition to that from the other side of the aisle, from the Democratic Party. And Mark, what I would tell you, someone who disagrees with my opinion on that, is that when we tell people that they don't have to work, we're not helping them. Mm-hmm. That we should celebrate work. They should have pride in what they do. They need to work. They need to have an income. They're not going to have Social Security benefits when they get to the age of 65 or 66 or 67, depending on how old they are. If they don't have work, our Social Security benefits are based on what our income has been in the past. And so people who think they're doing or who pretend they're doing others a favor by saying you don't have to work if you can work are simply not being honest. And so I'm very much in favor of the work requirements. We came to an agreement on what that was going to be in previous pieces of legislation for this year. I think we should honor that agreement at this stage. But I also think that, as we go forward in future years, that we need to take a look at that and really people who can work need to work, and it's in their best interest to work.
How has SNAP grown exponentially over the last 10, 15 years? It's tripled in size.
So it's food inflation is part of it. It is the way this current administration has chosen to do the formula on the thrifty food increases. It is now consuming 80% of Farm Bill spending. And as you know, if you take $1 and you take 80 cents out of it, that puts a tremendous amount of pressure on the production ag side of it. And so we now have less than 10% of what we call the Farm Bill, less than 10% of total Farm Bill spending actually goes to risk mitigation for production agriculture. And those of us from the ag belt recognize the cost of diesel, the cost of fertilizer, the cost of labor. The input cost going into the crop today is exponentially higher than it has been in past years. And yet reference prices, because of the way the formula is done there, have not moved to take into account the increased cost of production. And if you look at the economy and the projections for the economy going forward, if you have a recession kick in and you have a commodity collapse going into the next year, our farm families, which means rural America, are going to suffer greatly from those combinations of increased input cost and a potential commodity price collapse. So I'll tell you, it's not my job to run anybody's farm. I would tell you that if you're not buying crop insurance, and this is not a commercial, but if you're not buying crop insurance, I very much hope that you will consider that option as you go to plant this crop this year, because if you have a commodity price collapse, you're going to have something other than price loss coverage or agricultural risk coverage to fill that gap.
What made you get into politics?
I was always interested in it from a kid on, and then at the age of 26, I ran for the state legislature. I got elected. I served in the state of Georgia's legislature for 14 years. We're paid somewhere around $15,000 a year as a member of the state legislature. As we got into a recession, my business was hurting, and I needed to get out of the state legislature, go back to work full-time or be in politics full-time. So I was running for governor. I wasn't going to win. The NRCC came to me, asked me to run. This was in 2010. We ran a race that many didn't think could be won, and we beat a Democratic incumbent in what was truly the biggest red wave I think, the country's ever seen, and got sworn in 2011. And my wife had to talk me into running for Congress. I ran for one reason. This isn't necessarily good to admit, but I did not want Nancy Pelosi to be the Speaker of the House on what I thought would be Barack Obama's last 2 years as president. And my wife and I felt like if we could save the country from that, we would have done the country a great service. And so we've been here since then. I enjoy the time on the Ag Committee. I enjoy a lot of the good people up here like you, Mark, and enjoy the time on national security related issues. And, the frustrating thing for us is that it's just a very, very small group of members up here that kind of stand in the way of productivity. And I use that word productivity instead of progress because they can be two different things.
Right.
But, we have people who aren't on the Ag Committee that are out there ready to tank the Farm Bill, and they don't even know what's in it or what it's about. And they're listening to outside groups instead of the people back home. And that's the frustrating part of the job, as you know. But I was always interested in it. I do want to tell you, I got to know all four of my grandparents, and that was a real blessing for me. And one of them was a B-17 pilot. He was POW for a long time, and I say this to talk about the spending.
Right.
I busted my knuckles on the front end of a tractor one day, and I asked my granddad. I was about 19. Now mind you, he was a B-17 pilot at 19, and I'm working on the farm, but I thought I knew it all then. I asked him how come we couldn't have a new tractor, and he said, well, because we can't afford it. And my response is, again, as a 19-year-old who knew everything, never mind what he was doing at 19, flying B-17s overseas, everybody else has got them. And his response to me is they can't afford them either. The difference in us and them is we know it. And so, that's kind of the way I was raised. And every time I ride past that farm, I think of all the good times and the lessons I learned there from a very wise man. And I've just been very blessed to know all four of my grandparents. And I think that, and obviously my parents too, two great parents. My dad was a surgeon, mom's a school teacher. But I think the societal breakdown that we've had, Mark, I look at, how many people know any of their grandparents anymore, and I think that's the challenge we have, as we push forward in governing it, is the breakdown of the family structure in the country has done a tremendous.
What do we do about that?
You got to build it back. And, we need to get back to church. We need to get back into prayer. We need to stop judging people so hard. We need to show some grace. We need to cut the TV off. From the standpoint of the democracy, we need journalists to be journalists and not political activists. Our democracy depends on the public knowing the truth when they go to the polls to vote. And obviously, if you watch one news channel, you get one story. If you watch something else, you get something else. And as you know, as someone who's in the meetings with me, when you turn them on, both of them on, neither one of them's really giving an unbiased opinion anymore. And you're from that profession.
Right.
And I think journalism is the thing that we're lacking the most in our democracy right now. I trust that if the public knows the truth when they go to vote, America's going to be just fine.
Well, Austin, we'll see. We hope that happens a year from now as we elect the next president of the United States. Austin, thank you so much for being with us. I appreciate it. For Mark Alford's America, Hey, folks, we'll talk again next week. Until then, remember, I believe in you. I believe that our best days are still ahead of us. Austin, I believe in you, buddy.
I believe in you too, Mark.
And I believe in America. Take care. God bless.